Every great mystery begins with a question that refuses to stay buried. For 2,000 years, followers of Christ have revered Mary, the mother who cradled him at birth and stood at the foot of the cross at his death. But once the final chapters of the Gospel close, the record of Mary's life dissolves into silence. The New Testament does not tell us where she lived her final years, nor where her body rests. And yet, across the centuries, whispers have pointed to two places. Some say Mary's final home was Jerusalem, the city of prophets and martyrs, where a quiet tomb near Gethsemane holds her remains. Others insist she lived and died in Ephesus, a city of marble streets and pagan temples in Asia Minor, where she was protected by the Apostle John. Between these two claims, tradition is torn. The absence of proof has only fueled the fire of devotion, speculation, and faith. This is not simply an archaeological puzzle. It is a riddle of memory, theology, and longing. Because to ask, "Where is Mary's tomb?" is also to ask, what do we believe about her life after Christ? And more hauntingly, what does it mean if the most important woman in Christian history disappeared into mystery? The Gospels leave us with only fleeting images of Mary in the years after Jesus' resurrection. We see her at Pentecost, gathered with the disciples, when tongues of fire descended upon them. We know from John's Gospel that Jesus entrusted her to his beloved disciple, saying, "Behold your mother." Beyond that silence, it is in that silence that legends were born. Early Christian writers struggled to fill the gap. Some claimed Mary lived quietly in Jerusalem, near the places where her son had walked. Others believed she followed John to Asia Minor, settling in Ephesus, a thriving port city filled with cultures, ideas, and dangers. The mystery is sharpened by one fact: no universally accepted tomb of Mary exists. For the mother of Christ, this absence is shocking. Peter has his shrine in Rome, James in Santiago. Countless saints have relics preserved and venerated. But for Mary, only contested whispers. The void invites wonder and suspicion. To understand why Ephesus became central to this debate, we must enter the city as it once was. Picture it: marble colonnades glistening in the sun, merchants shouting in many tongues, the colossal temple of Artemis rising like a mountain of stone. Here, myths were currency. Gods were traded like wares, and every street corner carried a shrine. Into this world, tradition places Mary under John's care. She is said to have retreated into the hills above the city, far from the noise of the harbor. Her life was not one of grandeur, but of quiet survival, hidden in stone walls and olive groves. Centuries later, pilgrims identified a modest ruin on Bulbul Dak, Mount Nightingale, as her home. They spoke of visions, of mystical revelations that described the layout of the house long before archaeology uncovered it. The house of the Virgin Mary became a place where candles burn, prayers rise, and tears fall. For many, stepping into its cool stone interior is stepping into the breathing silence of the woman who once carried the Son of God. But is this memory ancient truth or later invention? In Jerusalem, another tradition holds sway. Beneath the shadow of the Mount of Olives lies the tomb of the Virgin Mary, a rock-cut chamber venerated since at least the 5th century. Byzantine mosaics, Crusader graffiti, and centuries of prayers attest to a long history of devotion here. Pilgrims descend into the dim crypt, lit by oil lamps and thick with incense, believing they have entered the final resting place of the Theotokos. Here, the geography fits. Mary had walked these streets, wept beneath these trees, prayed in these courtyards. Too many believers. It makes sense that she would return here at the end of her life. Jerusalem was not only the city of her son's passion, but the cradle of the earliest Christian community. And yet, skeptics point out that the Jerusalem tomb is no more definitive than Ephesus. The site was reconstructed, destroyed, rebuilt, and reshaped over centuries. What began as a devotional landmark may not necessarily mark an actual burial. In both cases, Ephesus and Jerusalem, faith outruns archaeology. Why do the scriptures tell us nothing of Mary's final days for such a central figure? The omission is deafening. Some theologians suggest it was intentional. The Gospels were focused on Christ, not on even the holiest of his followers. Others argue that the early church already knew her story and felt no need to record what was common knowledge. But silence is fertile soil. Out of it grew theologies of the dormition, the falling asleep of Mary, and the assumption that she was taken body and soul into heaven. These doctrines, especially in the Catholic and Orthodox traditions, suggest that perhaps there never was a tomb, at least not in the ordinary sense. If Mary was assumed, then any claim to her burial site is incomplete at best, misleading at worst. This tension between history and theology, absence and presence, continues to drive debate. The tomb is not just about bones and stones. It is about what we believe happened to the woman who gave birth to the Messiah. The story of Mary and Ephesus cannot be separated from the Great Council of Ephesus in 431 AD here. Bishops gathered in the very city where she was said to have lived, and they proclaimed her Theotokos, Mother of God. Imagine the scene, hundreds of clergy filling the marble basilicas, debating not only theology, but the future of Christendom outside. The people of Ephesus surged with passion, chanting Holy Mary, Mother of God, when the council affirmed her title. The city erupted with joy. Torches lit the streets, processions sang hymns, and the air trembled with devotion. That the council happened in Ephesus, of all places, lent powerful weight to the tradition that she once lived there. Was this coincidence, or was the city chosen precisely because her presence was remembered in its stones? The modern revival of the Ephesus tradition comes from a surprising source, a bedridden German nun named Catherine Emmerich. In the early 19th century, she claimed to see visions of Mary's final home. She described a small stone house on a mountain, with exact details of its rooms, orientation, and surroundings. Years later, explorers followed her descriptions to Mount Nightingale. To their astonishment, they found ruins that matched her visions almost perfectly. The house became a site of pilgrimage, blessed by popes and embraced by millions of visitors. Skeptics dismiss Emmerich's visions as coincidence or imagination. Believers see them as divine confirmation. Either way, her revelations reshaped the debate and gave Ephesus new authority in the modern age. Archaeological evidence at the House of Mary remains inconclusive. Pottery shards suggest the structure may date to the Byzantine period, centuries after Mary's time. Yet some features could be earlier, layered beneath later reconstructions. Archaeology rarely gives definitive answers. A ruin can be ancient yet not linked to the person tradition associates with it. What matters as much as stone is memory. The persistence of a place is sacred across generations. And in Ephesus, memory runs deep. The House of Mary may not prove her residence, but it testifies to centuries of faith. The very act of pilgrims walking its paths, lighting candles, and leaving prayers transforms the site into a living relic, regardless of what history concludes. Sacred sites are never just about holiness. They are also about politics. Control of Mary's tomb, whether in Jerusalem or Ephesus, means influence, prestige, and sometimes wealth. Jerusalem's claim ties Mary to the Holy Land, strengthening its identity as the heart of Christianity. Ephesus's claim elevates Asia Minor, connecting Mary to the spread of Christianity into the Greco-Roman world. Both claims serve theological and political purposes. This does not diminish the sincerity of belief, but it reminds us that behind every holy place lies a human struggle for authority. Perhaps the greatest mystery is not where Mary's tomb is, but whether she had a tomb at all. The doctrine of the Assumption suggests she was taken, body and soul, into heaven. In that case, the search for her grave is destined to end in silence. The absence of a universally accepted tomb may not be a flaw in history, but a feature of faith. Mary belongs not to one city, one shrine, or one ruin, but to the world. Her motherhood transcends geography. Theologians suggest this absence is itself a message. The woman who bore God cannot be contained by stone walls. Her presence is not locked in a crypt, but alive in the prayers of those who call upon her across centuries and continents. So where is Mary's tomb? Jerusalem whispers one answer. Ephesus insists another. Archaeology gives fragments. Visions give hope. Faith gives certainty of another kind. In the end, perhaps the question is not meant to be solved. Perhaps the mystery itself is the gift. For every pilgrim who kneels in Jerusalem's crypt, for every traveler who lights a candle in the hills of Ephesus, the question draws them deeper into faith, into wonder, into longing. Mary's tomb, whether in stone or in heaven, is a mirror. In it, we see our hunger for certainty, our love for mystery, and our endless search for the holy. And so the story continues. Pilgrims will climb, candles will burn, prayers will rise, and the Mother of Christ, hidden yet present, will remain, a silence that speaks louder than any proof. Some mysteries are not meant to be solved, only lived, and perhaps Mary's tomb is one of them. For more, you can subscribe to my channel and like my video.